Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteus and you are watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines for this hour. After a brief standoff, Colombia has agreed to the unrestricted acceptance of migrants from the US, averting President Trump's 25% tariff threats. Colombia had prevented 2 migrant-filled military aircraft from landing in the country. Palestinians have begun returning to northern Gaza after access was halted by Israeli forces. This comes as Hamas and Israel reach an agreement for 6 hostages to be released in 2 stages on Thursday and Saturday. A deal between Israel and Lebanon has been extended until February the 18th after the initial 60-day deadline passed. This follows the reported deaths of 22 Lebanese people by Israeli forces on Sunday. The M23 rebels in the Democratic Republic of Congo say they have taken the city of Goma as hundreds of thousands flee amid reports of killings. The Congolese government has slammed the Rwanda for supporting the rebel group. The US has decided not to impose tariffs on Colombia. This comes after Bogotá agreed to accept deported migrants without restrictions. The decision follows a standoff between the White House and Colombia's president over military deportation flights. The White House hails this as a victory for President Trump's hardline stance. Let's take a look at the report.
The White House said that the US will not go ahead with tariffs on Colombia after Bogotá agreed to accept, without restrictions, deported migrants. Donald Trump had ordered 25% tariffs on all Colombian goods after its president barred 2 US military deportation flights from landing in the country on Sunday. Colombian President Gustavo Petro had initially responded by saying his country would accept repatriated citizens on civilian planes without treating them like criminals. A White House statement says Colombia has now agreed to accept migrants arriving on US military aircraft without limitation or delay. Colombia said a dialogue would be maintained to guarantee the dignity of our citizens. The White House has hailed the agreement with Colombia as a victory for Trump's hardline approach after the country's 2 leaders traded threats on social media on Sunday. Within hours of the trade of threats, the 2 sides appeared to have resolved the row, and the White House said Colombia had agreed to all of President Trump's demands. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some more news updates from across North America. Rain has fallen on parts of Southern California on Sunday. Scattered showers are expected to continue overnight, increasing the risk of toxic ash runoff. This is a particular concern in areas that have been scorched by recent wildfires in Los Angeles. Flood watches have been in effect through 4 p.m. for burn areas from recent fires. These areas include the Pacific Palisades neighborhood, Aladenta, and Castaic Lake. North America's tallest peak has been a focal point of Jeff King's life. King and many others who live in the mountain shadow have said that most Alaskans will never stop calling the peak Denali. This is despite President Donald Trump's executive order that the name revert to Mount McKinley. US President Donald Trump issued an executive order on Sunday. The order establishes a review council to evaluate the Federal Emergency Management Agency. However, it stopped short of taking immediate action to shut down or reshape the country's lead disaster response agency. A car hit and injured 3 pedestrians in a crowd of people. They were leaving the Philadelphia Eagles playoff game on Sunday night. A driver has been taken into custody. However, the collision was not immediately appeared to be intentional. The Trump administration has urged US Agency for International Development workers to join the effort. The goal is to transform how Washington allocates aid around the world. This is in line with Trump's America First policy. It has threatened disciplinary action for any staff who ignore the administration's orders. A top Trump ally in the Senate has criticized President Donald Trump's decision. This decision was to issue a blanket pardon for nearly 1,600 supporters. They were arrested for their role in the Capitol riot on January the 6th, 2021. However, Senator Lindsey Graham said that this was a mistake to pardon or commute the sentences of people. Tens of thousands of Palestinians returned to heavily damaged northern Gaza on Monday as Israel lifted its closure for the first time since the early weeks of the 15-month war with Hamas, following a fragile ceasefire agreement. Here is the full report.
Israel has announced that Palestinians can start returning to northern Gaza after reaching a deal with Hamas for the release of 6 more hostages. This decision is part of ongoing efforts to maintain a fragile ceasefire in the region. Netanyahu's office confirmed an agreement for more hostage prisoner swaps. The ceasefire's first phase, until early March, includes 33 hostages and nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, while the tougher second phase is under negotiation, with Hamas demanding an end to the war. In this context, Trump suggested that Egypt and Jordan could accept more Palestinian refugees from Gaza, which he called a demolition site. He mentioned discussing this with Jordan's King Abdullah II. However, Trump's suggestion was rejected by Hamas and rebuffed by both Jordan and Egypt. Meanwhile, demonstrators in Tel Aviv are rallying for the release of Israeli hostages held in Gaza since the October 7, 2023 attack by Palestinian terrorists. Additionally, the leader of Yemen's Ansarullah movement warned that if Israel violates the Gaza ceasefire, Yemeni fighters will target Israeli interests. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates from across Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky replaces the commander of the military formation defending the Pokrovsk region for the 3rd time in a year. Major General Markielo Dripati now leads the Corsia group as Russian forces advance in the Donetsk region. Zelensky stresses the importance of effective combat coordination and training. The previous commander, Major General Andrei Khnatov, takes on a role focused on training and communication. An undersea fibre optic cable between Latvia and Sweden suffers damage, likely due to external influence, prompting a sabotage investigation by Swedish authorities. NATO deploys patrol ships as Latvian PM Evika Selina confirms significant damage and coordination with NATO. Data transmission disruptions are noted, but services continue using alternative routes. This incident follows similar events in the Baltic Sea amid rising tensions with Russia. Tens of thousands protest in Greece demanding justice 2 years after the Tempe rail disaster that killed 57 people. New audio suggests many victims died in a fire post-collision. Demonstrators accuse the government of negligence and cover-ups, with families filing lawsuits. The re-elected government promises reforms but faces criticism for slow progress. Clashes occur with police using tear gas against some protesters. Several influencers have been arrested for inciting violence, capitalizing on growing tensions between France and Algeria, as claimed by French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau. The French government has not issued the Algeria government of orchestrating these actions, with Retailleau stating there is no evidence of a coordinated campaign. Hungary is set to end its opposition to EU sanctions on Russia, due for renewal soon. This change follows months of delay linked to energy security and gas transit issues. Hungary's support is essential for unanimous approval for the sanctions, which are crucial in response to Russia's actions in Ukraine. In return, Hungary seeks assurances on energy supplies to Europe. The EU is set to ease sanctions on Syria following Bashar al-Assad's ouster, with a step-by-step approach, according to Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas. While some member states are cautious about embracing the new Islamist-led government, others support suspending sanctions in energy and banking. The EU will temporarily suspend the sanctions to maintain leverage, depending on the new government's commitment to inclusive governance. Lebanon extends its ceasefire with Israel despite delays in troop withdrawal as violence erupts in southern Lebanon, leaving 22 dead and over 120 injured. The UN warns that conditions remain unsafe for civilians returning home. Here is the report in full.
Lebanon has extended its ceasefire agreement with Israel until February 18, 2025, despite Israel failing to meet the deadline for the withdrawal of its troops. On Sunday, violence erupted in southern Lebanon, resulting in the deaths of 22 people and injuries to 124 others. The Israeli military has stated that its forces opened fire on civilians who were attempting to return to their homes in villages still under Israeli occupation. However, tensions have continued to rise, with both parties blaming each other for delays in implementing the deal. In response to the ongoing violence, the United Nations has acknowledged that conditions are not yet safe for civilians to return to their homes, urging caution. Hezbollah has hailed the day as a glorious one, with many residents expressing their determination to return to their villages, despite the risks. The situation has drawn international attention, with French President Emmanuel Macron calling for the immediate withdrawal of Israeli troops still present in Lebanon. Meanwhile, Lebanese officials have vowed to continue supporting the safe return of residents, with the Lebanese military promising to protect them from Israeli attacks. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates from the Indo-Pacific. Prosecutors have formally indicted South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol on charges of organising an insurrection. This was in relation to his brief declaration of martial law. With this, Yoon becomes the first sitting South Korean president to be indicted while in detention. The indictment comes just one day before Yoon's detention was scheduled to expire. He had been taken into custody on January the 15th by the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials. Yoon was officially arrested on January the 19th. Investigators say they have found evidence of a bird strike on the passenger plane that crashed in South Korea in December and killed 179 people. The feathers and bloodstains on both engines of the Jeju airplane were from the Baikal teal, a type of migratory duck that flies in large flocks. A tanker filled with liquefied petroleum gas exploded in an industrial area in Pakistan's Punjab province. It reportedly killed at least 6 persons, including a minor girl. The incident took place at the industrial estate in Multan Hamid's Pur Kanora area. The explosion in the LPG tanker triggered a massive fire, with debris from the shattered vehicle landing on nearby residential areas, causing significant destruction. Australia's southeast sweltered in a heat wave, raising the bushfire risk and prompting authorities to issue fire bans for several parts of Victoria State. The nation's weather forecaster warned that the temperatures could reach 41 degrees Celsius in Melbourne. This would be more than 14 degrees over the city's mean maximum temperature for January. Authorities rated the fire danger at extreme, the second highest danger rating in 5 Victorian regions. Pressure grew Monday on Fuji television over an alleged sexual assault by a celebrity presenter. The Japanese broadcaster is set to address the media as criticism mounts from advertisers and the public. The scandal centers around 52-year-old TV host pop megastar Masahiro Nakai. A leading tabloid magazine said that he carried out a sexual act without a woman's consent in 2023. Nakai reportedly later paid the woman who worked for Fiji TV a lump sum of 90 million yen, and then the pair signed a non-disclosure agreement. China's manufacturing activity shrank in January for the first time in 4 months. Official data shows that Beijing struggles to sustain the recovery of its economy. Policymakers have battled to reverse a post-pandemic slump driven by a crisis in the property sector, weak consumption, and high government debt. January's slide was affected by the approaching Lunar New Year holiday and concentrated return of business employees to their hometowns. Top NBS statistician Zhao Shui said. Russia, continuing its advances in Ukraine, has now claimed capture of another town in eastern Donetsk region. However, it has not yet been confirmed by Ukraine. This comes a day after Ukrainian forces struck an oil refinery in Russia. Here is a report.
Russian Defense Ministry has announced the capture of Velika Novosilka, a strategically important town in the eastern Donetsk region, whereas Ukraine says that its troops have only strategically withdrawn from certain areas. This capture, if confirmed, would make Velika Novosilka the first significant town to capitulate in 2025. In response, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has reported increased security in the region.
Доручив сьогодні посилити командний склад наших військ на Донеччині. Генерал-майор Михайло Драпатий направлений для керівництва оперативно-стратегічним угрупованням військ Хортиця. Це найжорстокіші напрямки боїв.
A day prior, Ukrainian air defenses downed 50 of 72 drones launched by Russia overnight. No immediate casualties or damages were reported. Additionally, Ukraine's General Staff of the Armed Forces said that they have struck an oil refinery in the Russian region of Ryazan. The facility reportedly produces fuel for Russian military jets. Elsewhere, Ukrainian NGOs catering to the needs of war veterans and their families have claimed a suspension of US funding is forcing them to halt their work. This comes days after newly sworn-in US Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced he would pause foreign aid grants for 90 days. President Zelensky later claimed that military aid to Ukraine would continue, but did not clarify whether humanitarian aid had been paused. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates from across South America. Colombia's government announced a $700,000 reward for information leading to the capture and conviction of 4 leaders of the National Liberation Army. The reward follows President Gustavo Petro's decree granting clemency powers to restore order in a region plagued by violence between the ELN and guerrilla dissidents. The Vatican confirmed sanctions on Cardinal Juan Luis Caprini, including restrictions on public activity and residence amid sexual abuse allegations. Caprini, the first Opus Dei cardinal, denies the claims but accepts the measures. He retired as Peru's archbishop in 2019. The case adds to upheaval in the Peruvian church following Pope Francis's dissolution of Solidarium Christianae Vitae, another movement tainted by abuse scandals. A court in El Salvador sentenced 3 youths to 5 years in prison and placed 5 others on probation after they were filmed making gang signs inside a school. The youths aged 12 to 15 were arrested following the TikTok video linked to the MS-13 gang. This comes amid President Nayib Bukele's tough crackdown on gangs, which has seen over 84,000 arrests. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro issued a decree granting clemency powers to restore order in the violent Catatumbo region near Venezuela, the region where a deadly turf war between the rebel groups has caused at least 80 deaths and displaced 36,000 people. The decree allows curfews, traffic restrictions, and other measures normally requiring congressional approval, marking a significant escalation in response to the conflict. Gunfire erupts in Goma, Dominican Republic of Congo, after accusations that Rwanda sent troops to support M23 rebels, which have the DRC called a declaration of war. As international calls for peace talks rise, Kenya has organised a summit between the leaders of both nations. Here is a full report about the recent events.
Gunfire erupted in Goma, Democratic Republic of Congo, amid accusations that Rwanda sent additional troops to support the M23 rebels, escalating tensions between the nations. The battle is the latest in a long history of regional conflict. The DRC condemned Rwanda's actions, calling them a declaration of war as the M23 advanced against Congolese forces. International pressure is mounting for peace talks, with Kenya spearheading diplomatic efforts. Explosions hit Goma as M23 fighters, backed by Rwanda, clashed with Congolese forces, overwhelming them, leading to some surrenders. Tensions have been rising since the M23 gained ground in the mineral-rich North Kivu province. More than 400,000 people have fled their homes as violence escalates, leaving civilians trapped in a desperate situation. UN peacekeepers have been caught in the crossfire, with multiple casualties reported. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called on Rwanda to withdraw its forces, urging an immediate ceasefire. Rwanda rejects calls to withdraw, citing security threats from the nearby conflict. Both nations have recalled diplomats amid worsening relations. With violence intensifying, the M23 continues to control key areas near Goma, prompting urgent calls for peace talks. Kenya's president announced a regional summit to address the conflict, offering a potential diplomatic path forward. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates from the world of business. A group of lawyers wrote a letter to the incoming leadership of banking agencies. They said US authorities must simplify the process to obtain bank charters. The letter emphasized the industry's need to adapt in an era dominated by fintech companies. It also highlights the complexity of securing a new bank charter in the US, which requires the involvement of multiple agencies. The letter comes at a time when corporate executives are hoping for a pro-business regulatory climate under President Donald Trump. Shares in Italy's Monte dei Paschi fell again, extending Friday's losses. This signals lingering investor doubts over the bailed-out Tuscan bank's bid for bigger rival Mediobanca, whose board meets on Tuesday to start reviewing the offer. Shares in MPS fell 1.5%, extending a 7% drop on Friday. The state-backed lender launched a surprise €13 billion share for Mediobanca. Its shares were little changed after Friday's 7.7% jump. The chairman of Julius Baer, Romeo Laccia, is set to step down from his position. This comes as it continues a management shake-up that began a year ago after it suffered major losses. In a statement, Bauer said that Laccia would not stand for re-election at its annual general meeting on April the 10th. His proposed successor would be nominated in March. Laccia informed the board of his decision in 2024, as per the Swiss bank. Chinese startup DeepSeek's AI assistant overtook rival ChatGPT. This comes with it becomes the top free-rated application available in Apple's App Store in the United States. Powered by the DeepSeek V3 model, the application has surged in popularity among US users since it was released. The milestone highlights how DeepSeek has left a deep impression on Silicon Valley, upending widely held views about US primacy in AI. DeepSeek researchers said that the DeepSeek V3 used NVIDIA's H800 chips for training. Ryanair's Europe's largest low-cost carrier posted an after-tax profit for the 3-month period that beat analysts' forecasts. However, it revised its passenger outlook on delays Boeing aircraft delivery. That was mainly due to a better-than-expected 1% increase in average fares in the quarter, compared with a fall of 7% during the previous quarter. Ryanair, which makes most of its profit during the summer season, said it was cautiously guiding after-tax profit for the 12 months to March 31st. Activist investor Ancora Holdings has built a stake in US Steel. It now wants the steelmaker to drop its merger agreement with Japan's Nippon Steel, as per a Washington Street Journal report. The activist investor also intends to rally shareholders around a plan to oust US Steel's top boss, David Burritt. The report says it has nominated 9 director candidates to the company's 12-person board. Earlier this month, former US President Joe Biden blocked Nippon Steel's $14.9 billion deal for US Steel on national security grounds. And that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more international news updates.